Okay. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the program. Thank you so much for joining us. Introduction to Simply Analytics. I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Juan, who's going to talk about Simply Analytics, this fabulous new resource that we have.
Well, thank you so much, Diane and Bill, for having me present to you all today. I'm really looking forward to the session this evening. Sort of the goal is going to be to kind of cover the basic features and functionality of the database. And we're going to just kind of explore some interesting data, answer some interesting questions, and just see where the data takes us. And if you would like to follow along, you're totally welcome to log in to Simply Analytics from the Arlington Heights library database page. So please feel free to do that if you would like to follow along.
Juan, thank you. I meant to mention that. If anybody wants to do it along, do it on your own, go ahead to ahml.info. And then, you're going to log in with your library card, databases, go to Simply Analytics, and then we've got enough user spots for you to do that. Thank you. I totally forgot about that.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started taking a look at this data here. So I'm going to share my screen and we will begin. Okay, so I like to begin all of these sessions with kind of giving you the elevator pitch of Simply Analytics, just to make sure that we're all on the same page about what the database is, what it does, what you can do with it, and why, right? So the idea behind Simply Analytics is that we partner with different data collection companies. And each of these companies kind of has their own specialty. So we work with like the census for demographic data. We'll work with MRI Simmons for consumer behavior data. And there's everything in between. So there's brand information data. There are psychographics, market segments. We're going to explore all of that today. But the idea is that we basically have these partnerships take their data that they specialize in and put it into our platform in a way that is approachable and easy to use for users. So it kind of makes this world of data and data analytics and big data, it actually makes it kind of approachable, functional, very, very hands-on. And we've spent years designing the interface in the hopes that it is actually approachable. So we hope that you think that too. Okay, so that's the idea with Simply Analytics. Now, the very first time you log in, you're going to be met with this onboarding tutorial. Definitely check it out if you're really, really new and you have some time. I'm going to close this out so we can begin here. So remember how I said at the beginning that we have all different types of data, right? Like brands and psychographics. Well, the one thing to remember is that everything is connected to locations. So it doesn't matter if you're looking at, the percentage of people who speak Spanish in Chicago, or you're looking up how many adults wear Adidas shoes in Arlington Heights. Well, it's all connected to locations, right? So that's the one thing to remember. So as we begin, there's only two steps. All I need to do is tell Simply Analytics which location that I'm interested in looking at. So we'll just we'll throw in Arlington Heights here. So I'm going to type that in and you can see we have Arlington Heights. I'm going to type in the city of Chicago as well, just for fun. I'm going to type in my home zip code here in Tucson, Arizona. And if you're wondering, or if you're curious how small you can get the data, well, you can get data down to the census block group level. And if you're not sure what that is, that's totally okay. I'm actually going to show you what it looks like. But think of it as locations that are much smaller than zip codes. Some people call them neighborhoods. So it's kind of neat to think that you have access to hundreds of thousands of data variables available down to kind of that neighborhood level, which is pretty mind-blowing. Now, don't feel like you need to specify every location here. We can always dissect Arlington Heights by zip codes. We can always look up the US by counties. We can always even remove some of these as well. But for now, I'm okay with these. So let's click on next. And there's actually only one step left, believe it or not, to getting started. Now, remember how I said that there's hundreds of thousands of data variables? Well, what Simply Analytics does is it kind of suggests some data variables to get you started. And once you become more adept in the database, You don't have to do what I'm about to show you, but 99.9% of users, your best bet at this point is to kind of look at some of these variables like median household income or percentage of people who are veterans, housing units. These are just really popular data variables. Your best bet is to click on this blue button here to create a project. So let's go ahead and click on this. And believe it or not, we have created our very first project in Simply Analytics. Now, here's what's interesting about the database. Whenever you create a project, what Simply Analytics does, if you look towards the very far right, it automatically generates some different tables and charts for you. If you look, you can see you have this comparison table, a quick report, a map, and a ranking. And we call these different reports and tables, we call them views. And the way to think of them is they're just different ways to look at data. And right now I have the map selected, of course. And each of these views, like the maps, has its own use case and can answer a different type of research question, which is really nice. We're going to explore some of these other reports, and I'm going to talk about the different types of situations that you might be in and why you might want to choose one report versus another one. But let's talk about the maps a little bit here. So you can see that we're looking at median household income in Arlington Heights by census tracts. Now remember, I said that we have data at really, the smallest geography is called block groups. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here by hitting this little plus option here, just to kind of give you an idea of what a block group would actually look like. So you can see as I'm looking at this kind of neighborhood, again, some people refer to block groups as neighborhoods. That's a pretty good way to think of it. But looking at this here, I'm going to click this little information button. I'm going to select this outline. So you can kind of see the outline of what that block group would be. So I would say about 95% of the data in Simply Analytics is available at this really small location type. Now, the nice thing about using this little eye tool on the map is this lets you click on any location and it's going to highlight that location. It's going to give you the name of that. So if you're ever kind of looking at a neighborhood in Arlington Heights or you're in Chicago and you're like, hey, you know, this area here is what I'm interested in, but I have no idea what block group that is, right? Like, and, you know, or this is where I live, but I have no idea what block group I live in, which is totally normal, by the way. So it's nice to be able to look at a map, use this little information button to click on an area and just to kind of get the name. And we could favorite this. So maybe this is where I live or something, or maybe I want to do some analysis on this location. We'll come back to it. So let's favorite this location. And I'm going to click my little hand icon again and zoom out. Now with maps, one of the use cases of maps is being able to visualize a location, right? So we're looking at Arlington Heights here. So just in case anyone is ever curious as to what Arlington Heights actually looks like the actual city boundaries, right? Well, this is what you can see outlined here in yellow, which is very interesting. Arlington Heights kind of has an interesting boundaries, which is, yeah, nice to be able to kind of see and look at. Now, we're looking at this, what's called a thematic map. And that basically means that we're just mapping a data variable. In my case, we're looking at income. We're still looking at income in Arlington Heights by these neighborhoods, right? And one thing that I'll point out is in your map legend, the map legend helps you to interpret what you're actually looking at. So you can see that there's a couple of different shades of red as I'm kind of looking around the map, or if I zoom out a little bit here, you can see that there's definitely different shades of red, right? And the map legend is helping you to interpret what that actually means, right? So you can see that these darkest reds would represent incomes of 104,000 to 250,000. The lightest red would be incomes up to 42,000. And you kind of get the idea here. Now, with your maps, you can change the way it looks. So in your map legend here, we can select edit, and we can do a couple of different things. I'm going to change the color scheme here. So maybe you wanted it to be this nice purple color. That's totally fine. You can even edit in your own ranges. So sometimes people like to say, well, I don't want to see 66,172. Maybe I just want to see 67,000 or something. That's totally fine. Feel free to explore and kind of play around with the maps, especially this classification method. I'm not going to talk too much about it, but feel free to kind of play around with the maps. You can change the colors, and don't worry, whether you are looking at any of these different colors or any of these different methods, you won't break the maps. So it's just nice to be able to kind of look at it in that way. So we go ahead and click on done here. Now, why do companies use maps, right? Whenever they're leveraging data to make informed decisions. Well, one kind of powerful use case of this is, well, finding target areas, right? If, for example, we are interested in identifying, well, where are specifically the lower income parts of Arlington Heights or any location of your choosing, you can use this to kind of identify where those locations are. And you can map any data variable that you would like. So you're totally welcome to map either of the hundreds of thousands of data variables that are available to you. Now, a really popular feature of the database is being able to work with businesses on top of your map. So you can actually place businesses on your map. Now, again, you can see we're still looking at median household income in Arlington Heights, but these are all drop downs, right? So if I wanted to jump over into Chicago, like we mentioned at the very beginning, you're totally welcome to do that. Feel free to toggle over into these different locations. If you want an entirely new one, feel free to click locations here and you can jump over into that location. So it's kind of nice to be able to quickly and easily jump into these different locations. So let's put businesses on top of this map here. So at the very top left, we call these the building blocks of Simply Analytics. So you can see we have locations, data. Let's click on businesses here. And in my little keyword search, I'm going to type in Starbucks here to this little black bar here. I'm going to type in Starbucks and press enter. And you can see that Simply Analytics is going to drop a little orange dot, right, to represent any business related to your keyword. In my case, I looked up Starbucks. Now, here's what's interesting and kind of gets to a little bit of what I was talking about. How, like, you can see looking at this map of Chicago by income, where the Starbucks locations are generally centered, right? And you can see, for the most part, they're kind of in the more affluent parts of the city. Now, why is that? Well, Starbucks is super expensive, right? So like if they're not going to be directly on campuses or in downtowns where there's a bunch of foot traffic by default, well, they're concerned about repeat customers, right? And generally speaking, it's going to be those households that might have more disposable income, and the people don't care that it's $15 every time you go, and you go 4 times a week, right? That's who they are trying to target, right, in some of these areas. So it's nice to be able to visually see that represented, right? So that's kind of a very simple but very direct kind of example. Now, you'll notice on the map that some of these locations or some of these little orange dots have numbers on them. That just means that we're kind of high up in the sky and the locations are close to each other. So if we zoom in and zoom in and zoom in and zoom in, they'll start to decluster, right? So I don't see like 50 or anything like that anymore. You can see there's just a bunch of Starbucks in the loop in Chicago, which makes total sense, right? Okay, so now in Simply Analytics, we don't need to necessarily use that keyword search. The keyword search is nice because it's super quick and it's easy, right? Like I just typed in Starbucks and press enter, and that's nice to be able to do. However, if you wanted to be a little bit more exact, or maybe you wanted to find a type of business as opposed to just something like Starbucks, for example, you can use what's called this business categories. So I'm going to click this option here. And what I want you all to know, and the sort of takeaway for this is that in the US, there's just different ways to organize businesses, and it's just a way to classify them. So if your business is a Mexican restaurant, there's a code for that. If your business is a hair salon, there's a code for that. And you get the idea. If it's a shoe store, there's a code for that, right? So what's nice is instead of using just a keyword search, we could say, well, let's look up a business code, right? Like maybe my business is this type of business, And I want to look up, well, how many of them are there already? And where are my potential competitors located, right? Where are they and how many are there? So this is a very wonderful sort of use case of still working with the maps. We're now going to be interacting with businesses via these categories here. Okay, so how does this work? Well, there's two different types that are used in the US. There's called these NAICS and SIC codes. And to be honest, every business has both of them, so it doesn't really matter which one you use. So feel free to use whichever one you prefer. I'm going to stick with NAICS codes here. And the way that this works is these are 6 digits. So I'm going to jump into these really, really broad categories like retail trade 44. And within retail trade 44, we have car dealerships, grocery stores, beer, wine, and liquor stores. I'm going to click on this 4451 for grocery and convenience retailers. And within that, you can see we have supermarkets, convenience stores, and vending machine operators. I'm going to click on convenience stores because I want to take a look at that one here. So let me click on that. And there you go. We are now mapping convenience store locations in Chicago. And think about it, we're still mapping income, right? But again, if we want to change any of these data variables, these are all drop downs, right? So we could say, actually, let me just see, the percentage of people that are veterans or the number of housing units, or we'll just toggle back to income, right? So remember, just this example that I showed you is really powerful if you think about it. Like this is already some in-depth analyses if you think about it. So what are we doing here? Well, we're creating a thematic map for median household income, and then we're placing businesses on top of this map in order to answer 2 foundational questions, right, that I mentioned. 1, where are my competitors? And 2, how many of them are there? So this is really great because different companies or entrepreneurs can say, okay, well, I was thinking of opening up a convenience store. And I know that I don't want to be directly downtown, but maybe I kind of want to be where there's, a bunch of convenience stores already located, right? Like, because maybe there's already a lot of traffic in that area. So this allows them to kind of look into some of these other neighborhoods to find that out, right? To see where potentially to site a business or build on a commercial site or something like that, right? Okay, now one little tip here with the businesses, if you're ever thinking like, well, I have no idea where my business, what the business code would be for my business, right? Like how I mentioned Mexican restaurants. Well, what if I have no idea which code Mexican restaurants are, right? Or any restaurant in particular. So what we can do is at the very top here in this little search bar, we can just type in that keyword. So feel free to type in something like, I'll type in restaurant. And you can see for my next codes, I basically have limited service. So that would be things like McDonald's and kind of like fast food, right? And then full service, I'd be kind of like sit down restaurants and things like that. But, I'm just going to toggle to SIC codes just to see what's available. And you can see they're a little bit more specific, right? I can choose like Chinese restaurants and I wanted Mexican restaurants here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that one. And there you go. We're now mapping those Mexican restaurants. So just a little tip there for you. Now, if you're watching this and you're thinking, well, I don't have a ton of use cases for maps, that's totally okay. If you just wanted this list or to interact with some of the data, let's talk about that now. So notice how at the very far right, where we have our different views, notice that there's one at the bottom here, this businesses one. I'm going to click on this. And this is basically going to store all of my business queries. So we looked up Starbucks and across all these different locations. So this is looking at Starbucks in Arlington Heights. But what if I wanted to look up, we had also looked up convenience stores as well. And it's giving you a spreadsheet, right? So think of this business report as just a list, right? Just as an Excel spreadsheet of all those little orange dots that you saw on the map. So we looked at convenience stores in Arlington Heights, Mexican restaurants. Let's look up Starbucks in Chicago, right? So I'll just hit this drop down. And yeah, there's a lot of Starbucks in Chicago. So it's very easy to be able to, again, kind of interact and do these complex analyses in a way that is pretty straightforward. So let's jump back into Arlington Heights here, and we'll look up convenience stores. Now, here's a little tip here, is you'll notice that there's a lot of data for every convenience store. If you click on View Actions at the top of your business report here, and you go to columns, there's actually a ton of fields of data for all of your different entries here. So maybe we want to look up, what's the primary contact's name, or what's the website, and things like that. We can add in all these different fields of data. And you can see how they just get thrown in there for you. And now you can see, well, I've got primary contacts names, right? I have the primary contact's name for all of these businesses. Now you have access to over probably 40 or, it will definitely more than like 30 or 40 million businesses. So feel free to interact with them in that way. Okay, if you would like to export this out of Simply Analytics, there's an export button at the very top right, and that export button is going to be there no matter what you want to export. So if you wanted to export your map and get the image, it's also at the very top right here under export. Okay, so we have plenty of users, and if you're sitting there thinking, I don't really care about the maps or the businesses, that's totally okay. We're now going to explore a little bit more about the data, the different ways to look at it, and the different types of questions that you can answer with that data. So let's go ahead and toggle at the very top right here to this comparison table. And think of the comparison table as you just want the answers. Just give me the data answers for my target locations, and that's all I want, right? It's like you're building a spreadsheet from scratch where you specify the exact locations that you want and the exact data variables that you want. Now, these has the locations that I chose at the very beginning, along with those data variables too. But maybe you wanted to add in maybe the state of Illinois. So I'm going to click on locations here at the very top. And I'm going to type in Illinois here so we could throw in the state. And again, you can see it, that's just been added in there, and the data just gets calculated. So if anyone was curious, how does Arlington Heights compare to, Chicago or the state of Illinois for things like median household income or something, it's just there for you. Okay, so let's add some data to this. Let's explore some of the data. Now, to be sure, I could talk about this data for hours and hours and hours. So I'm going to try my best to give you sort of a brief rundown of this. First, under this data block, one of your best friends is going to be this little search bar here, because remember I said that you have so much data? Well, there's no way that you're going to know every single data variable that exists. So if you're coming in and you're thinking, well, I wish I could look up some data on, like, I don't know, maybe some sort of like anxiety data or something like that, then under this data search, you can just type in that keyword, right? And we'll just find out to see if there's any data. And you can see that there's 18 results related to anxiety. And we can now take a look at this data, like, ailments or remedies in the last 12 months. Have you had anxiety, right? So let's just click the little data variable here. Once you see the blue check mark, you can close this out. And you can see that that's been added at the very bottom here for me. So I can compare these different data variables across these different location types, right? We're comparing a city with the zip code, with the state, all very quickly and easily. So the data search is excellent if you just want to quickly look something up, right? Like, is there data on Levi's or something, right? I'm just going to type in Levi's, and yeah, there's definitely data available for men's and women's clothing. Have you purchased Levi's, right? So I'll just click that one, and you can see it's added in there. So very interesting. The data search, super useful. Now, believe it or not, after I show you what I'm about to show you here in how to browse to the data directory, then we're pretty much set as far as the very basics of Simply Analytics, and everything else is going to be a lot more fun. So just hang in there with me. So let's explore the actual data directory. Okay, so under my data block, we can browse through the data. So let's take a look at, maybe I'm going to take a look at, let's say, education data. So let's click on this education category here. Now you can see at the top that there's almost 3,500 results for education. Now think about that. You have almost 3,500 variables available just on education. And you can see we have things on like the number of people that are enrolled in grade 5 through 8. Are you not enrolled? Are you in graduate school? Which levels of educational attainment have people reached, right? Let's just click on one of these here. Now, you could keep scrolling through all 3,500 variables, but that's kind of crazy, right? But what I will say is a little helpful tip here. Towards the right of my panel, you'll notice that there's a bunch of different options here. And think of this as the same way that you're shopping for things on Amazon. So let's say if I went on Amazon and just typed in shoes, I'm probably going to see like a million results or something, right? Probably more. But if I specify, hey, I wanted this color, this size, this brand, well, then it'll narrow it down. This is kind of the same thing. Like I clicked on education, but maybe I just wanted educational attainment data. So that filters it down a little bit. But maybe I wanted educational attainment data for, let's say, females that are Hispanic, right? So now I'm just clicking on some of these other boxes here. So now we're getting super specific, because think about it. We're now telling Symphony Analytics, I'm only interested in data variables that are related to educational attainment for Hispanic females, right? Try to say that 5 times fast, right? If you like a data variable that you like, just click on the data variable, close up the panel, and it's added in there at the very bottom. So it's really fascinating to compare, right? Kind of like, the Hispanic females in Arlington Heights, it's almost, 19% compared to the US, that's 10%, right? So yeah, just very interesting, right? We're just uncovering some insights into some of these locations for some of these data variables. Now, if you were looking at what I just demonstrated and you did not like that, that's totally okay. Instead, where it says browse by category here, you can actually choose to browse by data folders, and it's all the same data. It's just presented to you in a different way, in folders and subfolders. This is also going to show you where some of this data comes from. So maybe I wanted to look up something like consumer expenditure estimates. Well, this is going to be annual total and household average spending per year across all of these different items, right? I mean, we could look up, well, how much money are people spending on, we'll just go with health insurance, right? So I'll just kind of click these different options here, and you can see these are my data variables. I'm going to click on health insurance just to look that up. Now, some of these other data variables, and you can see it's been added in there at the very bottom. So in case you were curious, the households in Arlington Heights, once you combine them all, spend about $151 million on health insurance per year, once you just add them all up, which is really interesting. Okay, so I won't have time to explore every single one of these data sets. Feel free to please play around on the database to kind of explore some of these different options. But what I will say is I want to talk about this MRI Simmons local. This is a really powerful data set. This data set here is something that companies spend tens of thousands of dollars to have, just because it is like the holy grail of consumer behavior data. This is going to have over 8,000 brands. It's going to tell you, what were people doing between hours of the day, and a whole bunch of data, right? Now, I'm going to draw your attention to just some kind of fun stuff that's in the database. So we can look up, there's things like political outlooks and political affiliations. Well, that's not super fun. So let's stay away from that. Let's jump into, we'll look up some psychographics. So here's what's interesting about this data and why companies and political campaigns really like this. Well, this MRI Simmons, this company, what they do is they specialize in survey data. And they have this survey, and part of that survey, and the actual survey is tens of thousands, it's a bunch of questions, right? And what they do is they give people a bunch of just statements about their lives, and they rate how they feel about that. So here's what's kind of fun and interesting, because we could look up, well, what are people's attitudes and opinions about like food, for example? And you can see these different statements, right? That eating fast food helps me stay in my budget, or eating fattening food makes me feel guilty, or fast food is junk, right? And it's interesting because you can take all of these statements and we could look up, how do people feel about that? So let's say this data variable here for I frequently eat sweets. And we'll look at the percentage of adults who agree completely that they frequently eat sweets, right? I'm definitely in that group personally. But, it's nice to be able to pull that data and kind of explore some of those interesting data variables that you have at your fingertips. Again, I could spend probably days talking about this, but please explore all these data sets and this MRI Simmons. Yeah, it is again just the most amazing data set that's available from a consumer behavior perspective. We're looking up some things like psychographics and but feel free to look up, are people interested in camping or the lottery or movie attendance, right? Like when's the last time that you attended a movie? Or have you been to a movie theater in the last year, right? We'll just click on that just to see what that is. Okay, so I'm going to cut myself off from talking about the data at this point. And now what we're going to do is we're going to transition into, well, let's take it a step further, right? Let's kind of start doing a little bit more analysis in a way that is still approachable. Okay, so just to recap what we've done so far, well, we've created our project like we did at the very beginning. We were exploring the maps, remember? Kind of how you can zoom in, zoom out. There's a little information button, which is super cool. You can click on businesses at the top and either explore via the keyword or browse by business categories. And then we started to jump into the different ways to look at data, like the comparison table. Remember, I have some target locations in mind, like Chicago and Arlington Heights and the zip code in Tucson, and just give me the answers, right? Perfect. We also know how to explore data. So now let's answer different research questions and explore the data now. So at the very far right, where I have my different views, I'm going to click on this ranking report here. Now, the ranking report is a really interesting report because what it allows you to do is dissect locations. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, at the top, notice how it says we're looking at the top 100 zip codes in Arlington Heights. Well, you could say that there's 2 zip codes in Arlington Heights. Maybe I wanted to set this to be census tracts, which are smaller than zip codes. Or maybe I wanted to look up block groups, which are even smaller than census tracts, right? Remember those sort of neighborhoods that we were talking about? So here's what's interesting, and here's why I really like this report, is we can rank any data variable in the program. So if we wanted to say something like, well, show me the top 100 block groups in Arlington Heights, well, let's rank this by one of those data variables, maybe by median household income. And you can see that this is showing me that this block group, again, this BG8029001, I have no idea where this is, but that is the most affluent neighborhood in Arlington Heights. Now, because I don't know where this is, a little tip here is you can actually click on an actual cell here. So let's just click on this value and let's create a map here. So let's see where this location is. I'm going to go to view actions and apply location mask. So maybe the area off of East Charles and East Thomas. So, I'm going to zoom out a little bit so you can kind of see. So maybe kind of towards the far north of the city center of Arlington Heights is kind of where that neighborhood is. But yeah, it's really fascinating, right? Because we've now identified what is the most affluent neighborhood in Arlington Heights if we're looking at median household income. But think about it. We can use any of the hundreds of thousands of data variables and rank them too. So it doesn't just have to be median household income. Maybe it's veterans, right? So maybe we look up where it has the highest percentage of veterans. And because there's so much different data in the program, it can appeal to so many different types of audiences. So think about it this way. If I was like a nonprofit who offers services to veterans, well, wouldn't it be nice to know where which areas have the highest concentrations of veterans? Because maybe you open up, or maybe you have a little pop-up shop, or maybe you go into areas there and kind of drop off your flyer, your information, kind of broadcasting or showcasing, hey, here's where you can come get services. And I kind of know now where those areas are sorry, which neighborhoods have that highest concentration of veterans, if that's what I was interested in. Now, this is we can build this up as high as we'd like. So this is looking at block groups in Arlington Heights. But what if I just looked up, all of the cities in Illinois, right? And maybe we wanted to take a look at ranking that by income. So you can see that the most affluent city in all of Illinois is Killdeer, followed by Gulf, Illinois, which is it's a very appropriate name, right? Okay, so think of this as dissecting locations, right? This ranking report. And remember, you would never want to manually add in all the cities in Illinois into like the comparison table, right? So I just want to make sure that we have those distinctions. I mean, you could, right? You could literally click on locations and add every single one, but the ranking report does that for us and allows us to analyze all the smaller locations within one larger umbrella. Now, if you're looking at this report and you're thinking, wait a minute, why is there only 3 variables when in my comparison table, I looked up like the suites and going to movie theaters and things like that, like what's going on here? Well, this was created for me at the very, very beginning when I only had those 3. But what's really nice is at the very top right under view actions, if I click on edit view, it actually stores all of my variables that I've looked at, which is really, really cool. So let's add these in and yeah, click a few of those, click on done, and you can see they're automatically added to my table here. So if I wanted to see, let's jump into, we'll go back into Arlington Heights and we'll just rank a different data variable. So maybe we'll look up the top 100 census tracts in Arlington Heights that have the highest percentage of people who agree completely that they frequently eat sweets, right? So there you go. This census tract here has about 48%, right? Now, if you're thinking and you're watching this and you're kind of like, okay, but how do companies really use this? Well, remember, a lot of whenever we're working with data and leveraging data analytics, a lot of it, frankly, is to make informed decisions. So if we're like an advertiser or we're a marketing company, what would be super useful is to know, hey, where, like if we work for Reese's or Hershey's or something, right? And we're trying to figure out where should we showcase our ads? Well, all of these entities allow you to purchase geocoded ads, right? So maybe they're looking at all the cities in Illinois and where to target specifically for their ads. Because if you think about it, maybe showing your ad into every single city in the US, maybe that doesn't totally work, right? I mean, it's going to be more expensive, and yeah, it means your ad's going to be showed in places where people don't like sweets, right? So that doesn't really work. So it's all about trying to make informed decisions. So what I would recommend as you're exploring the ranking report, find some data variables that are pertinent to what your business might be related to. Maybe your business is like a coffee shop and you want to know, well, where are people spending the most money on coffee? You could use the ranking report for that. So yeah, so really, really cool report. I really like it, and I hope you did too. So let's take a look at some other reports now. So let's toggle to this quick report. I'm only going to spend like 30 seconds talking about this. This is a pre-built report, and what it does is it compiles, I think it's like 80 or 90 of the most popular demographic variables. So data variables related to things like age, gender, race, ethnicity, language, housing, all of it compiled automatically for you in a really nicely presented report. And it's pre-built, so I can't add in other data. You can see it's kind of grayed out here, but I can add in other locations if I want. So think of the quick report as, maybe you're kind of like, hey, I don't care about the maps with businesses, don't care to dissect locations. Just give me a snapshot of my community from a demographic perspective. That's what this quick report is. And if you export this, it does come pre-formatted as well. So it looks super nice. It just looks like this in Excel, right? Kind of with the grays and the blues, and it looks pretty nice. Okay, so this is really important, but at the very top right, where it says new view, I want you to click on this. And this is your launching point for all of the different types of charts and reports and all those views that I was talking about. Now, some of these should already look familiar, right? Things like the comparison table and the ranking and the business table. And I'm not going to have enough time to talk about every single one of these reports. You know, we're not going to talk about scatter plots or bar charts, but remember, they're just different ways to look at data, right? That's all that these different views are. But let's talk about, really briefly, let's talk about this ring study table, because it's pretty neat. Let's go ahead and click on create here. Now, the ring study table allows you to, all you have to do is you pick one location. So I'm just going to choose this block group here, which I think was, it was this location here. Yeah, it was kind of that really affluent area in Arlington Heights. And what I want to do is I'm going to tell Simply Analytics, well, this is the location that I want. Let's add in some data variables here. And so let's just add in a few of these. And I'm going to click on done here. And you can see that Simply Analytics will automatically calculate the data between a 1, 3, and 5 mile radius around your central point. Now, why would anyone want to use this? Well, think of it this way. Let's say, for example, that there is a place, a retail space available, right, for rent. And you're thinking, well, what is that? What is the immediate area like, right? Like, is there people there, right? Like, is there a lot of population, or is it just kind of more rural, for example? And it just allows you to kind of understand like what the surrounding area is like around one central point. So a very straightforward report. I can, of course, I'm totally welcome to add in other data variables, right? So if I go into, let's say, consumer expenditure estimates, and we'll just look up, how much money are people spending on, let's go with the food away from home, right? How much money are people spending on food away from home? So you can see that within a 1 mile radius of that block group, which was this one here, remember, the households are spending about 30, is that 30 million? I believe so, which is pretty good amount, right, of money when you put all of the households together and say how much money do they spend per year on these items. So again, fascinating to be able to look at, and super, super valuable, right? Like this is kind of the stuff that I'm showing you. It's kind of some of the things that consultants would do, right? For different clients, they would do things like create ring studies, tell them, hey, your location ranks the 58th city out of, the 180 in this state or something like that, right? Right. So let's click on new view at the top right. And there's two final things I'm going to show you today. So hopefully my internet is okay. I did get my voice might have broken up a little bit there. I did get a note that my internet was unstable, but hopefully it's okay now. All right, so there's two final things I'm going to show you. One of them is going to be working with this, with another sort of premium data set. Remember, we've talked a lot about spending and demographics and consumer behavior, and that's a big part of Simply Analytics for sure. But you also have access to market segments. And if you are wondering what is a market segment, you're in the perfect place, because I'm going to explain this out. I'm going to show you exactly what companies and political campaigns are doing, okay, with market segments. Okay, so basically, this company called Claritas, right? And you can see it's grayed out here because I haven't created anything, but I'm gonna click on related data table here. So this company named Claritas, what they do is they classify all of the households in America into 68 different what they call segments. And each of those households has interesting characteristics about it, like lifestyle characteristics, and they have kind of funny names too. So they'll have names like aspiring A-listers or kids in Cabernet or something like that, right? They have like these interesting names. Now, there's two ways that we can leverage this data that I'm going to show you. The first is to identify, well, what is the top segment in my location? A very, very foundational type of question that we can answer. So to do that, we're going to open up this related data table. The reason why I'm going to use a related data table is because this table saves me. Remember I said there's 68 of them? This saves me from having to click 68 times, right? Like I don't want to click 68 times. So this table helps me to only click once. So I'm going to go ahead and click on create here. And for the locations, I'm just going to click on just a few of these. But let's jump into that under data folder. Let's take a look at the Prism Premier. I'm gonna look up segments here. Now, it doesn't matter which one I click on. I'm just gonna click on kids in cul-de-sacs, which is, again, funny name. So let's close this out and click on done. So I've got my locations chosen, have my data variable, so we'll click on done. Okay, so Simply Analytics is going to crunch the numbers for me, right? It's gonna add in all of the 68 segments, which is great. Can see. And now if I want to see what is the top segment in that block group, right? What is the top segment here? I'm going to click on this location and I'm going to sort it from largest to smallest. And you can see that about 55% of the households in that location are considered money and brains. Well, let's see what that means. So let's click on the variable here and select view metadata. So you can see that that these residents, they seem to have it all. High incomes, advanced degrees, sophisticated tastes. So they live in fashionable homes on manicured lots with expensive cars in the driveway. They're environmentally conscious and they donate to political causes, the arts, and public radio. And then it's also going to give you a little bit more information about them, right? So these are just kind of general traits. So they might own a Lexus, eat at California Pizza Kitchen, go to Europe and maybe listen to jazz and contribute to public radio and TV. So very, very interesting, right? Now, to be sure, I've never been to that area in Arlington Heights, kind of this neighborhood here, but I have a pretty good idea of what the area is kind of like, right? I mean, that's 55%, but it's followed close, well, not really closely, but followed by 22% of young digerati, which are tech savvy, affluent, highly educated, people who want to live on the urban fringe. They eat organic foods. And yeah, again, also very interesting, and they watch ESPN. So it's all about getting insights into locations. Now, again, why is this useful for these different entities? Well, they might already be looking at locations on a map. They might have found some area that's particularly interesting to them in a ranking report. And they might be thinking, okay, is this an interesting place to advertise to or to market to or to go door to door to, for example? Well, one way to figure that out is to find out which market segment the location primarily consists of. So that's one way of using this, okay? The second way that this sort of data is used is to look at, and I'm going to show you here, and don't worry, this is recorded, so you will probably have to reference this again, but under support data documentation, what I'll draw your attention to is this Prism Premier segment narratives. And this is all going to make a lot more sense in a second, don't worry. And I'm going to explain it as well. So this is what political campaigns are doing, okay? So remember how I mentioned that, and this is just an example. Remember how I mentioned that all of the, there's 68 Prism segments, right? Well, what Claritas does is they actually roll them up into groups. And one of those groups is called social groups. So they take those individual segments and they kind of group them up, right? And they group them up based on urbanicity. So we have urban, suburban, second city, and rural. And then by incomes, right? Like very, very high incomes, like, deep six figures, millionaires up here, upper middle to middle, right? And again, middle, lower, and then lower incomes. And so what they do is they'll kind of say, like, okay, well, for my particular business or my political campaign, we really want to target a specific type of location, and that location type is going to be kind of like we want really sort of middle class suburban households. So what they'll do is they'll look at this document, right? And in this document, which by the way is on page 19 for the recording here, well, they'll go into suburban and we'll look again. I don't want the super affluent. I don't really want the rung below that, but I want kind of these middle burbs, right? Kind of still around, still higher incomes, but kind of more middle class. I want this S3, right, called middle burbs. Okay, so what they do is go back into Simply Analytics, and all we'll do is under New View at the top right, we're going to create a ranking table, which we already know how to do, which is super convenient. And let's create a ranking table for Illinois. And under Prism Premier, I'm going to open up the social groups for middle burbs. So let's click on that, select done. And now, if we are trying to figure out where to market our product in Illinois, and we're really interested in those suburban, sort of suburban middle class, right? Well, this is perfect because now we're going to look at, show me the top 100 cities in Illinois with the highest percentage of middle burbs. And now I get to see where those are. So this right here is worth a lot of money to different entities because we're now picking and choosing, and we're starting from a point of a social group, right? Like an income and a urbanicity standpoint. And now I have a pretty good idea of where I might want to market my product. So that's kind of, that covers I know that we're kind of coming up to the time here. So I'm going to spend 5 seconds here showing you one final thing just to make sure that I just want everyone to see this because it's pretty cool. So under New View at the top right, I'll draw your attention to this location query. Now, this is a little bit more advanced, but I really want to show it just because it's really powerful and it's something that I really hope people will take advantage of. So think of this location query as you're just asking Simply Analytics to give you a list of locations based on some conditions that you're interested in. Again, don't worry, this is going to make a lot more sense in a moment. So notice at the top where it says find all the zip codes. Let's find all the zip codes in Illinois, right? So we're starting really, really big here. Find all the zip codes in Illinois that match the following. Well, this is really interesting. Any data variable can actually be its own condition. So just for the sake of brevity, I'm going to go really quick here. So we're going to say all the zip codes in Illinois where the median household income is greater than 75,000 and there's more than 500 housing units because I don't want to see like really, really, really small places for my pretend scenario. And the percentage of people that have gone to an AMC theater in the last 12 months is greater than, I don't know, I'm just going to put like 10%. I don't know if this is going to work, but we're going to find out. I'm going to click on search. And you can see, yeah, totally worked. At the very far right here, you can see that there's 312 zip codes in all of Illinois that match everything that I set forth, right? Income greater than 75K, more than 500 housing units, and more than 10% of the people have been to an AMC theater, of adults, have been to an AMC theater in the past year. So again, I have this nice curated list. I would export this list. And yeah, if that's who I was trying to reach, this is showing you where those zip codes are. So I'm going to stop my share here and turn on my camera once again. So that covers all of the different features and functionality that I wanted to discuss today. Now, to be sure, we covered a lot, but I just want you all to know that the data that you have access to and the platform itself is enterprise, right? It's enterprise grade. It's the same data and platform that companies are using. And, that knowing that you can access this for the price of like a library card is pretty amazing because, again, this is a very expensive product, and I really appreciate you all joining me this afternoon. So I hope you learned some stuff today.
Thank you, Juan. There's so much great stuff in there. I know we're at time nearly, so just if you could be real quick with just a couple questions then. Can
Absolutely.
the ring chart show a block radius?
Oh, yes. So you can, so basically the way that the ring study chart works is whenever you select one location, which it can be a block group, but what it's going to do internally in the back end, how it's at 1, 3, and 5 miles, it's basically taking the boundaries of that block group and building that out within 1 miles around that block group, and then 3 miles, and then 5 miles. So it's going to include technically the block groups within that different radius, right? The 1, 3, and 5 mile radius. But yes, great question.
And then Bill had responded to this a bit, but just if there's anything, how you'd want to say in regards to projects getting stored. So are these projects stored by the library or not saved? For example, if a patron uses Simply Analytics and then their project is lost unless they export it, and then they would have to start a new project each time.
So as long as you create an account with us, which you can use an email address, the database will automatically save all of your work. So you can always come back in and rejoin and pick up where you left off. If you sign in as a guest, which is what I did today, as soon as I log off, everything is gone and there's nothing we could do, right? So all the amazing work that I just did this afternoon would be gone if you're as a guest. So we do encourage people to create an account. We don't spam you with emails. We might send one email like every other year or something like that. So so don't worry. I know that some people are concerned about spam. We do not do that. So yeah.
One every other year seems manageable. And then you had talked about this a few times and went into them, but if there was anything you wanted to add about the source data.
Oh, yes. So the data in Simply Analytics comes from different vendors, right? And you are able to view the metadata for every single data variable in the program. Now, one of those sort of the quick way to see is either just viewing the metadata, or if you're browsing by those data folders, it'll break it down by vendor. So for example, it'll show you that the Prism Premier data came from Claritas. When I was looking at the folder, the climate data came from the NOAA. And if you want to read a little bit more about that, then I definitely recommend looking at the metadata, because we'll always link to the actual source in that. So let's say, for example, that we have data that's from us, from US election data, but that just means that we had processed and worked the data to gather it. But we're always going to source exactly where that came from. So even like, for example, consumer expenditure estimates, remember how we had looked up like how much money are people spending on food away from the home or something? Well, that comes from we're the vendors that kind of takes the data and processes it. But if you look at the metadata, you'll see that actually is rooted from the Bureau of Labor Statistics Consumer Expenditure Survey. So definitely look at the metadata, but the sort of big picture, the quick sort of takeaway would be it would either come from Simply Analytics, the Census Bureau, the FBI, the NOAA, Claritas, or MRI-Simmons is kind of like a good rule of thumb. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Two more things so far here. Their situation, Bill had addressed this a little bit, but again, if there's anything that you want to specifically say, that someone's looking for a tool that will give them an outline of the maps of Chicago wards and Cook County suburban townships for color coding using their own data. So is that possible with this product?
Oh, got it. So you can create custom locations in the database. So I know that, so in Simply Analytics, we're using sort of the boundaries that are provided by the census, right? So things like zip codes, counties, census tracts. Whenever you get into things like wards, for example, or like neighborhoods or things like that, those don't follow specifically those exact boundaries, but there is a sort of loose way that you can do that. And there actually is, if you're in Chicago, what I would recommend is someone, I believe at a university, had put together all of the different, I think there's 77 or something like that neighborhoods. I don't know if that's what you're referring to specifically, but then they showed you which block groups that would correspond to. So it'd be like, oh, the 12th ward is these 5 block groups. You can create a custom location in Simply Analytics that says, hey, this location, it consists of these 5. And it's a little bit more of an advanced feature, but it's actually built in, if you want to see how to do that, that's actually under the support dropdown. And through one of the actual options that's available there, it's one of the guides. It's a training guide. It'll actually, there's a question associated with that. And you could kind of read and figure out how to actually do that. And it'll give you that step-by-step process. The most commonly asked question that I get asked that's related to that is when people say, well, I want to calculate data for downtown, right? But the problem with that question is downtown is not really real per se, formally, but it's probably 2 zip codes combined, or it's probably like 4 block groups or something like that. So you can actually create that in Simply Analytics. Now, as far as, so if you were to create those custom locations, Simply Analytics will calculate the data for those locations so that you can actually say like, hey, in the 7th ward, like how many people have a college degree or something, and we'll calculate that data for you, which is super cool. It's definitely an advanced feature, but just something to keep in mind. Now, as far as importing your data, you can import data into Simply Analytics, but you would have to use geographic identifiers called FIPS codes. And there's actually also in the support dropdown, there's actually, we'll show you a way how to do it. It's definitely more advanced. It takes a little bit longer to do, but you can technically import data. But yeah, it is limited. I don't want to, be misleading here and think that, you can import like, terabytes of data or something like that. Like you can't do that. But if you have like a spreadsheet that connected to those FIPS codes or block groups and said, hey, sometimes companies will do that like with their sales data. Like they'll say, well, these are all the zip codes, and this is how many sales we have in those zip codes. And you can import something like that, which is totally fine and really interesting because think about it from the perspective of like, hey, we have so many sales at these zip codes. What prism segment are those zip codes, right? Because then they're going to say, I want to know, hey, it's all the aspiring A-listers that are buying my really cool handbags or backpacks. Where do the other aspiring A-listers live, right? So that's sort of a nice kind of way to think about it from that perspective. But yeah, good question.
There's so much to do on here. The next thing is, let's see here. Can we do searches by date, like the Super Bowl day?
Oh, got it. Yeah, that's a good question. So unfortunately, we don't have temporal data, right? In Simply Analytics, the data itself is always going to be for a single, for the most part, it's going to be behavior, demographics, kind of spending and things that we talked about. But most of the data is just updated once a year. So it would be like MRI Simmons data for 2022, for example. And so you can't specifically put in a date, but if you were to type in, Super Bowl, there's probably dozens of data variables related to the Super Bowl, but it'll just be things like, did you watch the Super Bowl? Did you watch halftime show? Were you paying attention during the commercials or something like that? But we can't look up a specific date, which I will say that would be pretty cool. But at this moment, yeah, it's kind of limited to we don't have that functionality.
Okay. Well, and someone here said it's amazing that we can access all with the library card. And what can we do to get more training on this when we get a little stuck?
Yeah, so definitely in the database itself, there's a support dropdown that has a couple of guides and a couple of videos. And you can also send us an email from the database as well. So if you had another particular question that you were looking for the answers that wasn't covered in like the help center, there's also a help center, by the way, which has like frequently asked questions and stuff like that. But there's also a way to contact us directly, and I'm actually in charge of support. So, it might actually be me responding, and I would be happy to answer your questions. Yeah.
And if I could chime in here, I've been playing with this a bit, and I think I've built a little bit of an aptitude with it. So I can probably provide some local assistance on it as well. And Diane is getting up to speed as well. So certainly you can contact us. And if that doesn't work, we can also reach out to Juan or the folks at Simply Analytics. So we've got sort of tiers here, but
Yes, exactly.
So you've got lots of options for getting some help on it.
Yes, and then let's see. I think we're all set then. Someone says it's a fantastic tool. Thank you, fantastic and powerful stuff. So Juan, I think we all agree on that. There's so much in there. Really appreciate you going through it.
And if I could throw in just a couple of other things to say, partly because we picked up Simply Analytics. If you go into the research databases section of our website, so it's under the menus at the top of our website, research, databases, all databases. And you will see, first of all, the A to Z listing of all the products we have. On the left-hand side, there are major categories that you can browse through, things like business, etc. There is now a data and analytics category because we have Simply Analytics. We have other tools. There's another wonderful tool in there called Size Up Arlington Heights, which it takes a different approach. It's based on benchmarking. You can put in variables for your business. You can put in how much you expect to spend or how much you're going to spend on benefits, et cetera, like that. And it benchmarks you against other local businesses. So that's another startup tool. So it's a different approach. I think they work nicely hand in hand. So do some of your work in Simply Analytics and some of it in Size Up. Also for things like list building, we've got the tried and true reference solutions database, and that even has some analytics components built into it as well. So I think we're building up a nice suite, and we've also started connecting to some government open data sources that you can work with. We're starting to play with that. So I'm not such an expert on those, but we're figuring if we're going to give you all this cool stuff, we can also give you some of the government open data things. We're trying to make more and more analytics and data tools available to our users, and we hope you'll take advantage of it.
Yes, thank you, Bill, for going over that. And Juan, thank you for everything tonight, and thank you to everybody who came for spending this time with us. If you signed up through email, you'll get a survey. We would love it if you take a moment and fill that out for us. So thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your evening. Okay, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.